Hey, what's going on, you guys? Today's vlog post is gonna kind of sort of be like a recap of the vlog post from the other night. I'm really stumbling over myself here trying to find a way to describe what I want to talk about today. Let's just say that I'm going to use today's vlog post to kind of answer a few questions that came in regarding the live composite shot that I did the other night. I'm amazed at the feedback I got for that image, because to me it was just an easy, just quick setup, shoot, and basically stand around for 20 minutes and wait for the picture. But I know that unless you've been doing live composites, for at least a little bit of time, there's a lot of mystery to it. So maybe with this post I'll answer a few of those questions. So the first one was I had several people ask me why I used magnify to get my focus set. And the reason I used magnify is because you can't just turn the focus ring on one of your lenses until it stops, to reach infinity. And in a lot of cases, you've got focus by wire lenses they'll just keep turning. They're not necessarily going to hit a hard stop. And if you do have a lens that has a hard stop, when you reach that hard stop, that's not infinity. Infinity is actually back a little bit from that. So by using magnify, I can zoom in on something off in the distance. In my case, the other night it was the moon. I've used street lights off in the distance. I've used cars that are driving down the road, and once they got way off into the distance, just really quickly kind of nailed focus on those. Whatever it takes, and magnify makes that really easy. All of my cameras actually have one of the function buttons set to magnify, and that leads to another thing. Manual focus. You might be able to get away with autofocus in those situations doing that. I've done a cityscape in Chicago last summer. I did a live composite and focused on the Willis Towers, like the tallest building in Chicago. But there was so much light coming off of it that it was easy for me to just use autofocus to catch focus on it. But if you're out in the countryside, there might be a farmhouse off in the distance, you're going to want to use manual focus. And with the 7-14, you've got the focus clutch mechanism here, and if you don't have that on your lens, before you get started with the live composite, I suggest going into manual focus mode. The next thing that I seem to get a lot of questions about was the how long do you know to set the exposure for? And what they're referring to is the base exposure, and that's the exposure off of which all of the movement and light gets added to. And if you watch that video, I didn't know. There was some trial and error involved in that. I mean, I had a decent idea, that it was going to be probably in like the 10-second range, but I started off with a shorter exposure. I always start with like what I would consider to be on the short end of the exposures, just so that because I'm lazy and I just want to get the exposure rolling. I don't want to have to step through like a 20-second base to find out that I overexposed. I'd rather start off underexposed and use a little less time. That's just me being weird, I suppose. That shot ended up being, I think it was a 10-second base exposure maybe. And people often think that what that means when you go into the menus, and it talks about your composite settings. So when you're in live composite and you hit menu, you see the menu for live composite come up, and you've got all these different times. Those are the times for your base exposure. Those don't really have anything to do with it's not like you're taking a bunch of 20-second exposures. You're taking a base exposure. After the base exposure is triggered, basically the shutter stays open, only recording new instances of light. So think of the time that you see on the live composite settings menu as the amount of time you need to expose that initial scene. And like I said, I think for me that was a 10-second base exposure, and I ran it for about 20 minutes. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if this vlog post doesn't make any sense to you, just jump back a couple of episodes. I think that the vlog post was titled What Goes Bump in the Night or something to that effect, because it was pitch black and almost pointless to do a vlog post that way. But you know, I hadn't done one yet that night, and thought, hey, it'd be kind of cool to do one while I'm shooting a live composite. Another question I get is, do I need to turn image stabilization off when I'm doing live composites? No, Olympus takes care of that for you. You know, once you're in manual mode and once you hit the live time, live bulb, live composite, any of those settings, the IS automatically turns off. They know you don't need it, so it shuts off for you. Another question I get from non-Olympus users or people who have an Olympus camera that doesn't do live composite, like the original EM5, are you stuck with a JPEG? No, if you were stuck with a JPEG, it'd still be a good JPEG because Olympus JPEGs rock, but you're not. You get a RAW file for this, so yeah, you've got a killer RAW file to work with. But in all honesty, most of the time, you're probably going to take that RAW file and shoot it out of Lightroom or whatever as a JPEG, because you won't even have to do anything to it because it's going to look great as it is. What other questions did I get? Oh, I got here's like another one. Somebody wanted to know, how did I know which way to be facing so that I got a spiral and not like, if you've ever shot anything other than due north to do a live composite or star trails photo, if you're not facing due north towards Polaris, the North Star, you'll end up getting non-concentric rings of stars. It'll end up, they kind of go off to the sides. It just doesn't, it doesn't look like the traditional spiraling star trail image. And well, clue number one is face north. To make it quick and easy, if you're not familiar with the constellations and knowing where to look to find Polaris, there's a really cool app that I use on Android because I'm an Android user right now. It's called Stellarium, and it's really cool. It uses the compass in your phone, and basically you hold your phone out in front of you, and as you raise and lower your phone in real time, you're seeing the names of all the stars in front of you. So that's what I would recommend for somebody who's not familiar with it, and it's killer for figuring out where the Milky Way is at, which if you're here in the northern hemisphere, you want to start looking towards the south because that's where the galactic core is, and that's the best thing to shoot for Milky Way. And that's a completely different subject for a different vlog post. So yeah, that just answers a couple of the questions that I've gotten. So, you know, how to get focus in the dark. There's always a beacon of light somewhere out there, right? You can try and focus on those. Manually focus probably the majority of the time, unless you're in a situation where there's plenty of light, like a cityscape, at which point you just use autofocus. Turning off image stabilization, no, Olympus handles that for you. Are you stuck with the JPEG? No, Olympus gives you a killer live composite RAW file to use. Few other little bits and bobbles of information on, and you know, finding the North Star. But another little bit of information, I guess, would be that, and I totally lost my train of thought. Oh boy, it's been one of those days. So yeah, I totally lost my train of thought, forgot what I was going to talk about there. So I figure I might as well just wrap it up before I look like an idiot. Thanks for tuning in today, you guys. Tomorrow's vlog post, maybe a little bit more shoot oriented, I guess. I'll have a camera with me out on the road. You guys take care. See you tomorrow.